a grim black limbo. As morning arrived, Colleen felt exhausted. She'd hardly slept at all, and now she had to wonder what would happen next. Cameron came to get her. He removed the head box and then opened the body box that had kept her pinned in position. She breathed in relief, but was still afraid of this man. Would he now let her go, or was there more in store? He starved her for the rest of the day and finally gave her a meal of water and potatoes. Cameron hung her for a while and then put the head box back on. She had no idea when he was going to come or go, or what he had planned for her. She was allowed to use a bedpan and was then stretched out on a rack where she lay immobile for hours. Another whole day went by before she was allowed to eat again. Cameron forced her to drink some water and eat an egg salad sandwich. She ate it, but the day was hot and humid, so she declined to finish a second one. He angrily reminded her that she ought to be grateful. She protested that she was full, but she quickly learned that a slave did what she was told, no matter how she felt. For her disobedience, Cameron hung her up again with some leather cuffs and whipped her until she passed out. When he finally took her down, she was still not hungry and she was in extreme pain, but she forced herself to eat the rest of the food. Satisfied, he tied her up, replaced the head box, and left. Colleen was deeply relieved to finally be left alone, but still very much afraid. This was to become her routine, a single meal for the day, torture, isolation, and uncertainty. She existed in a grim black limbo, wrote Christine McGuire and Carla Norton in their book on the case, Perfect Victim, the true story of the girl in the box by the DA, who prosecuted her captor. Helpless. Sometimes I thought I was just going to go crazy, Colleen said. A family search. After Colleen had been missing for 4 days, her friends in Eugene contacted her family, who had not seen or heard from her. They all grew concerned. Colleen's parents discovered her plan to go to Westwood, and upon calling her friend there, realized that she'd never made it. She generally kept in touch with them, so on May 23rd, they filed a missing persons report with the police department in Eugene, Oregon. She was 5'6", they told the officers, and weighed around 135 pounds. She wore her brown hair long and straight, and she had blue eyes. Her parents, divorced and remarried, both lived in Riverside, California. Colleen herself had been married just before she turned 17. A high school dropout, she'd wed Tom Smith, 22, but their life together in Ohio had lasted only a year. She came home to get her high school degree and then moved in with friends in Eugene who became her adopted family. Though she had 2 sisters at home, she felt closer to her friends. Tom Smith was an obvious suspect. Not much was known about him, except that he was from Ohio. But he'd never bothered to come after Colleen before, so there was little reason to think he'd just grab her. Eventually, hope receded. Colleen's family just knew something terrible had happened to her. She would not have let us worry, her sister Janice told A&E. Though she had found respite with another family, she was always thoughtful enough to let her parents know where she was. It would be a very long time before anyone who knew and loved her ever saw her again. Janice believed that someone had killed her, or perhaps that a religious cult had abducted her. Colleen's mother made frequent calls to the sheriff's department in Eugene, but they never had any new information for her. The family grew disheartened. The company, as time went on, Colleen saw very little of Janice or the baby. For most of the day, she was left chained, blindfolded, and stretched out naked on the rack. Cameron visited her frequently to whip her. Sometimes when he strung her up, naked and bruised, he would take pictures of her and develop the film himself. Every once in a while, a more sadistic streak ran through him, and he'd hold Colleen's head underwater until she would lose consciousness. She wondered if he'd go too far sometime and kill her. Colleen would frequently ask him when he was going to let her go. He would always say soon. Despite his unrealistic fantasies, Cameron had a practical side. He realized that keeping Colleen chained to a rack all day could harm her health. He had to think up another way to keep her under control. So for 10 days he worked on a box that looked like a coffin. Until it was finished, Colleen had to make do with the rack. Then into this tiny wooden cell, Cameron placed her sleeping bag. He shoved earplugs in her ears and chained her up before closing her inside. There she would remain until he wanted her. This was the routine for over a month, and at no time was Colleen allowed to shower or clean up. She lost around 20 pounds and stopped menstruating. Her world became the box, so she began to adapt. Cameron had equipped the box with a blower for circulation, but it did not control the temperature, so Colleen learned to approximate the time of day by the temperature inside the box. Cameron's bondage sessions with Colleen grew longer and became more frequent. For added torture, he'd use a heat lamp to burn her skin or to electrocute her. Sometimes he would strangle her, and the whippings never ceased. He was sexually excited by all that he did to her, and the sessions would end up with him molesting her, although he did not have sexual intercourse with her. Then one day, he decided to put her to work. He constructed a tiny cell that fit under the staircase, and into this he placed Colleen, unshackled but blindfolded. After closing the door, he'd remove the blindfold and order her to shell nuts or do macrame. This became her small realm of liberty, the only time she had the freedom of movement, contained though it was. Months came and went, and Colleen turned 21. She spent that day, as well as Christmas and New Year's Day, in the coffin. After 8 months of submitting to torture and the uncertainty of ever getting away, Colleen suddenly learned something new. Cameron subscribed to an underground sadomasochistic newspaper called Inside News. The edition that came out on January 1st, 1978, contained an article entitled, "They Sell Themselves Body and Soul When They Sign the Slavery Contract." That gave him an idea. He set about to create a contract, one that would appear to be legally binding. He gave Colleen the slave name, Kay, and he signed the contract himself with a false name, Michael Powers. By the end of that month, he made her read the article and then sign the contract as Kay Powers. She thought what she was reading was pure evil, but he told her that either she would sign it or he would sign it for her, and then make her wish she had. She complied. The document contained the rules she was to follow, and her signature meant that she agreed to them. She was now to refer to him as Master, and to keep her body open to him at all times for his satisfaction. If she did not comply, he would not be allowed to keep her, and she might be turned over to someone not as nice as he was. He lied and told her he paid $1,500 to register her with something called the Slave Company. He explained that people with the company were watching them all the time, and they had even bugged the house. They knew who Colleen's relatives were and would kill them if she ever disobeyed. Janice was his slave as well, and should either of them attempt to escape, the company would punish them by nailing their hands to a beam and hanging them up for days. He always had things to back up his stories, Colleen reported, and I believed what he said. Colleen remained his captive for 7 years, but the conditions would shift and change with Cameron's obscene inspirations. She learned to shut down her emotions. "The more I played his game," she told journalist Betty Leese, "the better it was for me. If I fought, it went on forever." She learned that begging for mercy only further incited him, so she stopped asking. In his presence, she contained her tears so he would not know how she felt. She used the power of her mind to escape her situation. But each day she was brought abruptly back.